Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information that you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Monday, wherever you get your podcasts.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Happy Monday.
We're back.
Best day of the week.
Yes. I love it. That's the best way to start the pod. Welcome back,
Wednesday's
Jamie.
pretty good now. Wednesdays are pretty good, but Mondays are still the best day of the week.
Amen. We're not in competition, but if we were, we would still win. Just saying. Just saying. Sorry for Steve and Sarah if you're listening.
And for those who don't know what we're referencing, we have added a show focused mostly on hotel news. It airs at the same time on Wednesdays, so tune in.
Welcome to the amazing Good Morning Hospitality podcast, where we are growing and expanding. We had a busy week last week. Not only did we have our Monday episode, we had a Wednesday episode, and then we had a bonus episode on Friday, September 1st, with the one and only Jamie Lane of Hotel Data, Jan, over at CoStar. Jamie, why didn't you ever introduce us to Jan before all of this? It just makes no sense. We didn't even know you existed. You have a doppelganger.
I've been friends with Jan for going on like 15 years now, and actually co-presented with him down at the Booking.com conference in Miami this year. So,
awesome!
Jan's a great guy.
Yeah, loves our chat. And he's confirmed to be on September 20th for a hotel episode. So we'll have him again for all the listeners, maybe who didn't get to tune in. But if you didn't, go backwards.
You're the Jan of STR data, and he's the Jamie of podcast data.
Yeah. It was cool. Definitely a fun deep dive. We got into the hotel inventory pipeline of, extended stays and the hot topics around that. So good stuff. I'm excited for this episode because, Jamie, you got to pull up some data around regulations in the New York area, plus tons more that I probably don't even know. So I'm excited to jump into the main chat. But really quick before we go in, I am just super thankful for all of the listeners who have shared the Sojo box, the wine box that you guys have received. I've gotten a couple DMs, a couple messages, and it's just been really cool to see. So we're excited that you guys are signing up, getting your wine after a busy summer. And I know that I will definitely not be drinking wine in my morning cup at all, if you know what I'm saying.
It's a holiday. We already confirmed Jamie has a Bloody Mary in his hand.
Yeah, that's true.
That dark coffee covered Bloody Mary.
That'd be a terrible combo.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, at the end of the episode too, if you are tuning into the live or listening to the replay, we have a fun little announcement on a special guest coming up next week. So don't miss out on that announcement, but we'll also post about it on our socials. So make sure you're following us, liking and subscribing, all that good stuff. Now, gentlemen, let's jump into the main topics of today. We saw an app or a company called Kiki, Kiki. It's a sublet app basically, and they've raised $6 million. And unfortunately, the three of us, we're just not going to make the cut for this app. We're wanting to make profit, and we're a little bit weird.
Clubhouse, but it's like Clubhouse, but for Airbnb.
Yeah, basically.
Their broader vision is to be a community-led marketplace, which I love. And if you're renting out your home in a loose term of renting, I guess that does help skirt regulations. So I kind of like the business model. It's like a third home meets Airbnb, possibly. I just heard about them for the first time last week. Again, none of us are cool enough to actually know and use. So Kiki founders, if you're listening to this right now, please contact us. We'd like to be cool too. But I do think it's an interesting concept. The where Airbnb often falls short is knowing the place you're staying is going to be quality and knowing the guests that are staying in your house are quality. So if they've been verified because they got invited by a real person, that's kind of that's the whole premise of Kiki, is just being able to trust that you're opening your home to someone that is a real person, that's not there under a fake profile and just going to throw a party. So I've got a lot of firsthand experience with my years at NoiseAware of the stories of house parties and how they happen and who books them and all of that. So hopefully they're onto something. I think it's cool. Again, shoot us an invite. We'd love to check it out. But maybe the next year or two we'll be cool enough to have access.
Let's say, Michael, can you say you're a little bit of a party expert, maybe?
Well, not the past couple years, but in the years leading up, yeah. I knew my way around a party or two.
I think Jamie is in the same boat. Maybe.
Yeah.
He still gets out on the dance floor though, so that's good.
It is interesting though, sort of digging into the sort of trends of like why stuff like this is resonating. One, on the midterm rentals, people renting out for a month or more, which is clearly what this is going after. And this company used to be called are known by Easy Rent. It aligns really closely with another company that I know, ReRent, that was entirely going after being able to rent out homes or apartments for students when they went home for the summer, and they're essentially place was going to sit empty for that 3 or 4 months, 3-month period. So, and then sort of the connecting it and back to the early days of like when we were all doing couch surfing and then Airbnb.
That predated Will here. He's not old enough. Yeah, there's not enough gray in that beard.
But like building up reviews and like, oh, like we're friends on couch surfing, like I'll host you, like, and it was all built like, it seems almost like a paid couch surfing for midterm rentals, which I know a lot of people wanted to be able to pay for couch surfing. That was a lot of what Airbnb ended up being, was sort of a paid couch surfing. Like, I'm willing to keep hosting people, but I want to get paid for it. And they never created a way to really monetize it, and there was obviously a need for. So maybe they have something though of creating a way to monetize it. I don't like the whole, and we were chatting earlier, and not putting a focus on profit, because in the end, no one wants extra people staying in their home. And if it's not going to make you some money,
might as well just open up the doors.
It's a very short period in your life where you're totally fine opening your entire house to a stranger for free. So that doesn't last too terribly long. But yeah, at some point, even like beer money, right? Like something to cover the pain of having or the potential of having a rough guest. Now, the cool and most interesting piece of this, I think, is the closed user group, which helps mitigate or eliminate regulations. So we've seen a lot of regulations catch up to short-term rentals, but that's a public access group. If you just never invite a public official, they'll never know what houses are available on Kiki. So don't invite anyone that works for the government, and this platform could work. But in all seriousness, besides that point, which was also serious, that we've seen cities like New York ban short-term rentals forever. And I actually had a friend ask me, he's going up to New York at the end of this month, and said, hey, what are some good short-term rental properties or companies up in New York? And I was like, well, technically it's illegal. He's like, well, why are there so many on Airbnb? Well, because Airbnb is not the law. They're not enforcing the rule. But come tomorrow, I believe, the 5th,
Yeah.
New York and Airbnb are enforcing the law, which means there were a little over 200 legal short-term rental properties. Now that
Out of like
doesn't
70,000, or was it? I may have read that number wrong. Jamie probably has the data better, but
yeah, we'll lean on the data guy here in a second to give us the real numbers. But I mean, aside from those companies that have a hotel license, like a Mint House, for example, you're not able to monetize your house anymore. So I think Kiki is an innovative business model, and government, it took them how many years for New York City to get to this point after having a ban? How many years is it going to take to catch up to an adaptive business model? So, Jamie, hit us with the data.
Yeah, and Kiki's going after, and what the majority of Airbnb hosts are in New York now is longer term rentals. So there are, and this is sort of the I feel like the weekly zeitgeist of like what every media company has been reaching out to over the past week. So got a lot of data to share on what's going on, given and a lot of people have been interested in it. But and overall, let's start top level. There's 47,000 listings in New York on Airbnb. But then you start to get into what's legal and what's not. So starting on September 5th, tomorrow, if it's a listing more than 30 days, you're allowed to stay on Airbnb. And over 55% of the listings in New York are 30 night stay and longer, so midterm rentals. So that's the majority of listings in the city, and those will continue to be legal. The other big piece of that, so of the 47,000 listings, almost 20,000 of them are private and shared rooms. In private and shared rooms, so renting out while the host is present is legal, but you have to register. And that's where there's this big backlog of rental or of listings that people are trying to register, but the city has had a hard time actually processing through. And as of like late last week, they'd only processed like 250 applications. They have announced that they're not going to be enforcing them for a while. So we'll see what happens to them. It might take us some time to sort of get the supply back. But I believe that a decent percent of those sort of active private rooms will eventually come back if people are actually able to get them registered.
Heather's got a good question that there's multiple ways to answer this. Can people get around this by hosting for any number of days during a 30-day period? Heather, legally, no. In all reality, yes. It's a pretty common thing. And we saw this in the UK, in London in particular, when they put a 90-day rule on short-term rentals, which meant you could only rent out your property for 90 days a year. What happened was people would rent it on Airbnb for 90 days, on Booking.com for 90 days, on Expedia Vrbo for 90 days, Direct for 90 days, and bam, your whole year's taken up. So government thinks they're really smart. They don't really know how everything works, so they write laws in ways that there's loopholes. Can you get around it? Yes. It does take a bit of a savvy traveler to ask, to say, I'll book it for 30 days, but I'm going to check out after 5 days, and so I only want to be charged for 5 days. Yep. So Heather, looks like you do that in Park City with the 30-night rule. Or one neighborhood does. I'd imagine there are people, call them bad actors, if you will, but enterprising individuals that are working the system a little bit.
Yep. And the vast majority in New York, even if we look at those that are outside of the 30-day plus, outside of the private and shared rooms, aren't. And it's literally people renting their place out occasionally. Listings don't have a lot of reviews. They're not available most of the year. It's people sort of renting out the place occasionally when they're maybe outside of the city and going home on the weekend sort of thing. What I'm watching, though, and in terms of the people that really are doing it, what it looks like full time, there's about 4,000 listings in New York that are short term and stays, available more than 180 days over the past year, and generating a lot of reviews on Airbnb and Vrbo. So these are like the active ones. These are the ones that probably the city cares most about. And those 4,000 listings generate 40% of the revenue in the market. So these are the active ones. And
these are the money makers.
These are the money makers. But when you think of, and this is obviously what the law was meant to target, was these money makers. But then you think about why they're doing it, and to sort of bring housing back into the market. We've got 4,000 listings in a city with over 3 million housing units. Like, is this going to make any difference in the housing market in New York?
Yeah, so that's a question that Jeremy said. What's the logic in not allowing the monetization of short-term rentals? It's to Jamie's point, the zeitgeist of or the bugaboo of affordable housing in many places like London, Paris, and New York, where they're just not affordable anyway. And if they can point to these 4,000 properties that are available on a short-term basis, that's 4,000 more homes that are available to the general public. Now, could the general public afford a 3-bedroom in Manhattan? It's not really affordable anyway. So the whole argument is it's a good one for politicians, but in reality, it's not
great in
really
theory,
based in data or logic.
Yeah,
that's just one. I mean, there's bad neighbors. There's inability to collect taxes. There's a whole number of reasons why people don't want short-term rentals. But in the end, up in New York, the biggest argument is affordable housing, and it's not like is 4,000 homes in a pool of, how many did you say? 6 million?
A lot. I think it's like I think it's like 3.5 million.
I love it. The data guy answers with a lot.
a lot of zeros. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the bad thing about this is when legislation like this passes, then it spreads. And we saw recently in Montreal, they're facing a pretty similar legislation like New York has. And then I was reading this morning, Scotland as a country, not just Edinburgh as a city, Scotland as a whole is really struggling with short-term rental regulations. It's largely targeted at Edinburgh, and the bystanders outside of the city are taking it on the chin. But when you have bad regulation, or when you have good regulation, it spreads. People copy what others do. So if they see something working in one city, they're lazy. They're just going to copy what others have already done and written. And that works both ways. If there's a great piece of legislation, a city will copy it. But there could be a terrible piece of legislation that the citizens think is a good one, and the government copies it. So it's not a good bellwether. And maybe, Jamie, this is a question for you, that when major cities do outright bans and cut the number of listings down significantly, Airbnb is promising a massive amount of growth to shareholders in the terms of supply. Mm-hmm. Can they deliver on it when there's a war at City Hall with the biggest cities?
Yeah. The Airbnb's presence in these major cities, or these major cities as a percent of total listings on Airbnb, has been decreasing substantially over the past 8 years. It decreased substantially during COVID. And even since then, it's continued to get as a smaller percent. It's just the growth outside of these major cities has just exploded. So they're getting their 18-19% growth that they're seeing right now, and largely without getting any additional new supply from these large major cities. So they've really pivoted their sort of inventory acquisition model outside of major cities, which has been very beneficial to them. I did pull the data real quick on New York, and one of the so I was right, 3.6 million housing units in the city. So an increase of 175,000 units since 2017. So we're adding significantly more units every year into that market than the entire sort of short-term rental inventory in New York. So, and then one of the other favorite stats is that New York is like this, and so are a lot of other major cities. So you think of where housing stock is actually being wasted. It's luxury condos that foreign nationals are buying and sort of parking their money in. And so you essentially have entire buildings in New York that are sitting empty, that people have bought these condos, bought these units, but don't actually plan on living with them. And so as of 2021, there were 353,000 units that were vacant and not available for rent. That's crazy.
Yeah, it seems like there should be a law there. Open up if you're not going to visit it once a year, open it up for someone to rent. Although no one could afford that. It still mitigates or negates the entire affordable housing argument. And it's not New York alone, right? We see that in Vancouver. We see it in Miami.
Yep.
We see it in LA. But none of these, if you're arguing for affordable housing in Park City or in Aspen, sorry, that's just not a city that there's affordable housing available. Like, you have to be really wealthy to afford living in one of those places, period, much less the rent, right? Like it. So,
well, Michael, let's be. I was gonna say,
it
let's
just
be
blows my
honest here,
mind.
though. The like you made the comment earlier that one city makes a change in regulation, and then other cities will copy it if it's a good it's not like they're not copying it because it's good. They're copying it because it's trending on media. And whether like banning short-term rentals is not like a trend, in my opinion, when a government official or any political figure in government does the same thing because New York did it, is complete just a copycat trend without even knowing the data. I'm sure they don't even pull the numbers on this type of stuff. And again, it's just a way to no. So none of this, like, to us, this makes sense, but to them, they're like, oh no. But we have a couple locals who really are tired of their Airbnb neighbors or whatever it is, and it's maybe a drop in the bucket compared to the actual.
That's exactly the problem. The loud vocal, sometimes majority, sometimes minority, shows up to City Hall because they really hate short-term rentals in their neighborhood. And to be fair, I wouldn't want to live next door to a short-term rental. Like, sorry, I just wouldn't. I think there are ways or zoning that you can do that's open in different ways. Where I live, there's parts of town that it's legal to do it in, and there's parts of town that it's not. That way, if you're moving in and you're buying a place, or you should, if you cared enough to look it up. But at the end of the day, a lot of the people that do short-term rentals aren't voters in the city they operate short-term rentals in. And so they don't really have a voice. They lean on the local business people, maybe their local staff, to show up at city halls and argue it. And it's hard to put up a good argument when half of your rentals in a specific city aren't even owned by people that live and pay taxes in that city. So I get it. It's a challenging and complex issue. We all love short-term rentals, but I also think it's probably safe to say none of us would want to live next door to one. So
I don't see the issue of living next door to one. I just moved out to the suburbs, so I'm down to live next to one. I'll take it.
Jamie,
maybe not
live next door to one.
Absolutely. I actually live next door to one. I've got one right next door. I love it.
Okay.
That's
All right, I'm outnumbered. Fair enough. I'll take that one.
I also have the name and number of the person that owns the house, and like but there's the only
good
thing
neighbor.
that I was worried about was they had rented out for a commercial shoot one time, and they were actually filming for 48 hours straight all night. They had big lights pointed on the house, but they were great. They were quiet. Like, it was fine. I was really worried it was going to mess the kids' sleep up, and it ended up not. And
yeah, I think if I operated the one next door, I'd be fine with it. But the risk of having someone else who like, yeah,
well, hey,
I don't know.
The perk of all of us having a short-term rental living next door is that we all know how to help them out. If like, hey, let's be a good neighbor, let's communicate, let's get them some noise monitors, let's get them with safely, let's get them some AirDNA data, let's help them out, help out these hosts.
Yeah.
I'm all in for that.
I mean, to be fair, I've rented out my personal house in my neighborhood, and my neighbor had a sign like, "Don't short-term rental our neighborhood." And I went and told her after football season was over. I asked her if she knew that I had rented it out like 5 times during the year, and she said, I had no idea. It's like, okay, great. Well, take that sign out, please. So, I am in support of short-term rentals. I just, it's fair to say that I wouldn't necessarily want to live next door to one.
Yeah, I agree. But it's all about how you manage it. I think, again, it comes into the education piece, which is a huge part of what we do in the podcast. Having these conversations is important. People like Heather and Jeremy who have tuned into live, who are part of the industry, whether it's the sliver of short-term rentals or if it's the greater pie of hospitality. I think, again, this is all really important stuff to cover, to showcase, to talk about, whether we agree or disagree. I think it's a overall good conversation all around. But are you guys ready to do a quick little announcement and move on, or should we talk about Restoration Hardware? Maybe, I don't know. What are you guys feeling? What are we feeling here?
Touch on that real quick, Will.
Okay, Restoration Hardware, we all know and love. They're getting into the luxury hotel market, so let's go. I'm excited.
I've often wondered why bigger brands haven't done this sort of thing before. We've seen like Bass Pro Shops has built a resort before. It does extremely
Taco
well.
Bell did a pop-up hotel in California, which was really fun. They had a Baja Blast mountain thingy.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know if I'd want to go to the Taco Bell one, but I'm sure you had a good time, Will.
It was awesome.
But why not have big trusted brands, especially ones that are associated with comfortable and good aesthetics and design? Makes total sense. Like, why not JV with developers and build something cool? Because the brand's already trusted, right? One of the hardest things to do in hospitality is to build a trusted brand that guests know what to expect. And when you think of Restoration Hardware, it's going to be comfortable. So,
and on the flip side, though, they're a furniture company, right? They're not a hospitality company. So it takes finding that good partner that is going to be a good and representation of your brand that you can trust long term, because you don't want it and 3 years from now, it just like everything's tired. It's like, all right, what? And people are getting a bad taste in their mouth by staying in a Restoration Hardware hotel. Like, as long as it's being done right. But we talk all the time about companies staying in their lane and do what you do well. And it could be very hard for a company like Restoration Hardware long term to keep a brand that people sort of love and trust.
Their dining is amazing.
Yeah.
They should not get into the operations, full stop. Yeah. They're not a hospitality company.
They should be a flag.
Yeah, it's use the branding. And when I was in college, I did an internship with a hospitality consulting group, and we worked on it never came to fruition, and this was more than 15 years ago, so I'm sure my non-disclosure is up at this point. But we worked on an Apple hotel where where you could, very futuristic at the time, but you could use your phone to get into the room. You could drop it on a speaker and you'd have speakers, surround sound. You could, every room had an iPad and it controlled the TV. Like at this time, this was like absolutely 10 years ahead of its time. I mean, we're still working on getting a lot of these things adopted in hospitality.
Hopefully that will be around in 10 years from now, man.
Yeah. So it was a really cool concept, but I mean, leveraging a brand like Apple people would have stayed there just because of the forward thinking technological aspect of it. So
100%.
I love these JVs in hospitality. Why not?
Agreed. Well, the restaurants are amazing. I dined at a Restoration Hardware in Scottsdale. Awesome experience, great food, great all the stuff. So I'm in on the same page as you guys. I want a good operator, good flag. But I'm excited for this. So this announcement that we had to pull some strings. We have to give a quick shout out to Steve Davis over at Operto. Speaking of smart tech and all the fun, fancy stuff that Michael was talking about with smart locks and all that. We have a amazing and special guest joining us next week on the podcast. His name is Sam Shank, and if you don't know that name, he was the CEO and founder of Hotels Tonight, which got acquired by Airbnb, and he's going to sit down with us for 30 minutes next week. Michael, I'm curious on what's your what's the number one thing you want to talk to Sam about publicly on the podcast? Behind the scenes, we won't count.
Oh man, there's a lot. I think we can get into that next week. I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah, good point.
We got a whole episode on that.
I'm always about teasing, the listeners and the viewers, but we'll save it. So Sam Shank joining us next week. Go ahead.
He had quite a fun ride from building the hottest new OTA app, essentially, then getting purchased by Airbnb, and then the IPO of Airbnb, like bang, bang, bang. And I'm sure the entire story is not all, home run wins like that. So I'm excited to see what's inevitably, I'm sure, a roller coaster ride that Sam took. So,
do you guys use Hotel Tonight?
I have, yeah.
I have.
I actually just booked going to Denver next week. I booked my hotel yesterday on Hotel Tonight.
It's great.
Nice. Yeah, you're not gonna be staying at Central? Oh, shocked, Jamie.
Well, I'm coming, bringing my wife out. We're going to see a show at Red Rocks on Saturday night, Sunday night, Sylvan Esso. So had to book. I'll be staying at Central the rest of the week.
Nice. Well, no, I have fond memories of my hotel management days. 2019, we implemented Hotels Tonight and actually saw a significant booking increase, but then also the guests were actually really, really decent to work with. Like they weren't like your, no offense to anyone from booking.com, but they weren't like your booking.com guests where they were just a pain in the ass. Excuse my language. But it was, we had definitely had that trend. You saw booking.com guests were like, oh God, here we go.
I think it's more for the seasoned traveler because I'm pretty, I jump on buying my flights well ahead, but oftentimes I would use Hotel Tonight. I'd land in a city and be like, all right, what's the cheapest or the best bang for my buck that I can get right now? So I loved it. I'm not a big OTA user, to be fair, and Hotel Tonight was one that I would continuously go back to. So super pumped to have Sam on.
Yep. Hotel Tonight founder joining us next week. So for all the listeners, likers, and subscribers, make sure you tune in. If you don't tune into the live and ask any live questions, you can get the replay wherever you get your podcasts. And Jamie, I kind of want to give you the opportunity to tease. Do you have something kind of exciting happening this week by any chance?
We do. And since I'm not going to be on for a few weeks, I will tease it. I might get in trouble for it, but who cares? Who cares? We are relaunching AirDNA later this week. So whole new site, whole new subscription model, access, low price, access to every market around the world. No more subscribing to individual markets on AirDNA. All new charts, all new tools. Like it's awesome. If you go on now, you won't see it. If you go down at the end of the week, you will. I forget which day it's actually going live, but check back at the end of the week and you will see.
We'll share it.
Yeah,
we'll share it for all of our GMH listeners and viewers. We'll share it on our socials when it goes live.
Hope you don't get in too much trouble, Jamie.
What?
Yeah. Hope you don't get in too much trouble.
Yeah.
Jamie, Demi's texting me right now. You're screwed. You're screwed. She's telling me to cut the live. She's telling me to cut the live, so we gotta go.
All right, we are 5 minutes over on the holidays, so we will cut the live.
All right.
Exciting, well, Jamie. We're excited to see what to get logins and play around with this.
Yeah,
I'll set you guys up.
All right. There we go. You heard it here first. All of our GMH listeners, make sure you stay tuned for AirDNA 2.0, Sam Shank next week, and of course, our hotel crew this coming Wednesday. Sarah and Steve will be joining again, 7 a.m. PST, 10 a.m. EST. And like always, we'll see you again next week.